But yes, I feel like I've been on the ground a little bit more this series so far, but we just keep getting back up, so.
Creams Lexie Hull like she did 5 times in game 1. Watch how the third quarter goes down. At least they called this one. A'ja Wilson.
What happens when a teammate finally says enough is enough? When the hits stop being just part of the game, and a player's anger boils over.
Doesn't like Lexie Hull. She's always pushing her, but that's an illegal screen, and then Lexie Hull gets called for a foul.
That's exactly what happened the moment Sophie Cunningham watched her Indiana Fever teammate, Lexie Hull, take yet another punishing blow at the hands of INJURES Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces. The hit left fans stunned, Lexie clutching through pain, and Sophie visibly furious. And make no mistake, she didn't keep it bottled up.
A'ja Wilson, look at that foul they called for. Yeah, saved her. That's some bullcrap.
Sophie Cunningham exploded, and what she unleashed wasn't just about one foul. It was about years of frustration, a league that too often looks the other way, and a message to everyone watching. This can't keep happening. Now let's set the stage.
Look at that. Another foul. Bailed out by the refs.
Third quarter, the series already heated beyond recognition. Lexie Hull had been battling through a back injury from Game 1, already a walking example of grit. But then came the collision. INJURES Wilson, the MVP, blindsided her on a screen that looked less like defense and more like an outright demolition.
This is the worst one. They call this a jump ball. How is that a jump ball? Nobody even had possession. Aaliyah Boston, that's anything is.
Lexie hit the floor hard, and instead of whistles blowing in her favor, she was somehow tagged with the foul. The Fever bench couldn't believe it. The fans couldn't believe it. And Sophie Cunningham just about lost it. Her teammate was being punished for playing tough, while the superstar on the other side was being praised for intensity. And here's where Sophie's fire really showed. She's always been known as one of the most competitive, outspoken players in the WNBA, never afraid to chirp, never afraid to scrap, never afraid to defend her team. But this time wasn't just trash talk. You could see it in her body language. She was furious at the refs, furious at the Aces, furious at the system that lets this happen. She barked at officials, gestured wildly after whistles, and you just knew her voice would carry into the locker room and beyond. Sophie wasn't going to sit back while Lexie Hull's pain got brushed aside. Because here's the truth. This wasn't an isolated foul. Game 2 was a brawl dressed up as basketball. 41 fouls, 16 in just the third quarter alone. Players flying to the hardwood possession after possession. It didn't feel like playoff basketball, it felt like chaos. And in the middle of it, Lexie Hull taped up and sore, kept pulling herself off the floor, kept shooting, kept draining threes. 5 in total, tying a Fever playoff record, all while grimacing through back pain. That's the kind of toughness that inspires teammates. And for Sophie Cunningham, watching Lexie bleed for the team and still get treated like the villain was the breaking point. Now, Sophie Cunningham has never been one to hold back her feelings. Her career is full of moments where she's clashed with opponents, challenged officials, or stirred up drama that everyone ends up talking about. She has that fiery edge, and love her or hate her, she owns it. But this moment, this one was different. She wasn't stirring the pot for herself. She was standing up for a teammate, for Lexie Hull. And in Sophie's world, that's non-negotiable. You mess with her teammate, you mess with her. And this is where things get bigger than just one foul. Sophie knows the WNBA has a problem. Too many times, players like Lexie, Caitlin Clark, even Sophie herself, have been on the receiving end of brutal physical play with little to no protection from the league. The fouls pile up, but the whistles don't. Or worse, the wrong player gets penalized. Fans see it, players know it. And Sophie Cunningham decided she wasn't going to stay quiet about it anymore. Her reaction wasn't just anger in the moment, it was a full-throated call out of how inconsistent, unfair, and dangerous this has become. Think about the optics. INJURES Wilson, praised nationally for her stats, walks away celebrated. 25 points, 9 boards, 5 steals, 2 blocks. That's what the headlines ran with. But nobody mentioned how many of those points came with elbows flying, bodies being shoved, and whistles bending her way. Meanwhile, Lexie Hull, playing through pain, gets little credit for her 5 threes and relentless fight. That imbalance lit a fire in Sophie. She couldn't stand seeing her teammates' courage ignored while the league glorified a stat sheet built on chaos. And Sophie's not alone in this frustration. Fans have been screaming about it all season. Social media has lit up with clips of rough fouls on Indiana players, commentators pointing out double standards, and a growing chorus asking why the league doesn't step in to protect stars and role players alike. Sophie Cunningham became the face of that frustration in this moment. She gave the anger a voice, raw and unfiltered. What's so fascinating is that Sophie's explosion fits perfectly into her identity. She's never been the polished, quiet type. She's outspoken, sometimes controversial, always fiery. And that's exactly what the Fever needed. Because let's be honest, without someone willing to call out the imbalance, the cycle keeps repeating. Sophie took that burden on herself, knowing the risks, fines, criticism, maybe even backlash from league officials. But to her, protecting Lexie Hull was worth it. Now let's talk about Lexie for a second, because she deserves just as much spotlight. Game 1 left her with a back injury serious enough that she was listed as questionable. Most players would have sat, not Lexie. She suited up, taped herself tight, and went to war. And then on top of that, she got targeted physically over and over. Yet somehow, she drilled 5 threes, each one a dagger that said, "I'm still here. I'm not backing down." That kind of resilience is rare, and it's exactly the kind of thing that bonds a team. Sophie saw it, appreciated it, and made it her mission to defend it. And if we zoom out, this isn't just about Sophie or Lexie. It's about a bigger pattern. Caitlin Clark has been shoved, hacked, and mocked all season long. Sophie herself has been in the center of rough fouls, often walking away angrier at the refs than at her opponents. Lexie has been banged up repeatedly. There's a through line here. Indiana Fever players are absorbing punishment the league doesn't seem eager to correct. Sophie Cunningham calling this out isn't just drama, it's a wake-up call. The fallout has already been explosive. Fans rallied behind Sophie, praising her for sticking up for her teammate. Clips of her reaction spread quickly online, with many calling it the most real moment of the playoffs. Some even argued that her anger might be the spark Indiana needed heading back to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Because now, this series isn't just about basketball. It's personal. It's about pride, fairness, and a team that feels like the underdog being held down by both opponents and officials. And that's where things get even more interesting. The series shifts back to Indianapolis. Gainbridge Fieldhouse, loud, intense, 17,000 Fever fans packed in and ready to roar. And Sophie Cunningham, you better believe she'll be leading the charge. At home, every shove against Aaliyah Boston, every hack on Lexie Hull, every whistle swallowed will be met with an eruption of boos and chants. Officials won't be able to hide behind silence. The pressure will be palpable, and Sophie will feed it, amplify it, and turn it into energy. Because here's the secret about Sophie Cunningham. As fiery as she gets, she channels that fury into fuel. When she feels her team has been wronged, she plays harder, talks louder, and drags everyone else into the fight with her. Heading into Indy, that's exactly what the Fever need. Not just execution, but emotion. And Sophie is bringing both in spades. So what happens next? That's the real question. Will the league try to find Sophie for speaking out? Will officials tighten up after all the criticism? Or will the Aces double down on physical play, daring Indiana to keep fighting through it? One thing's certain, Sophie Cunningham isn't backing down. Not from Maja Wilson, not from the refs, and not from anyone who tries to dismiss Lexie Hull's courage. In fact, this moment may go down as one of Sophie's defining statements as a leader. For years, she's been known as a spark plug, a player who brings energy and heat. But now she's stepping into something bigger, the role of protector, defender, and voice for her team. And if the Fever ride that energy to another win, people may look back and say Sophie's explosion was the turning point. So as we head into the next game, remember what's at stake. This isn't just about a foul or even a series. It's about respect. Respect for Lexie Hull's toughness. Respect for Indiana's fight. Respect for players who refuse to be shoved aside. Sophie Cunningham made sure the world knows the Fever won't stay quiet. And now the spotlight is brighter than ever. But here's the question for you. Was Sophie right to explode, or did she go too far? Should players keep emotions in check, or does the league need more voices like hers calling out the truth? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, because this debate isn't going away anytime soon. And if you're fired up like Sophie, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because this story is only getting started. The Fever aren't just fighting the Aces anymore, they're fighting the narrative. And with Sophie Cunningham leading the charge, you better believe it's going to get loud. What makes Sophie Cunningham's explosion so powerful is that it didn't happen in a vacuum. This wasn't just one emotional outburst in a tense playoff game. This was the culmination of an entire season where Indiana Fever players have been targeted, battered, and too often ignored by the officials. Sophie's rage in that moment was the tip of the iceberg, the breaking point after months of swallowing frustration. Think back. Early in the season, Caitlin Clark was shoved to the floor in a moment that went viral for all the wrong reasons. The rookie sensation, the face of women's basketball's growth, sent flying with barely a whistle to be found. Fans cried foul, analysts debated endlessly, and yet nothing seemed to change. Then came more. Hard screens, hip checks, elbows in the paint, one after another piling up. And where was the protection? Where was the consistency? For Sophie, for Lexie, for Caitlin, the pattern was undeniable. The league was letting physicality cross into recklessness. So when Aja Wilson flattened Lexie Hull in Game 2, Sophie Cunningham saw more than just one foul. She saw history repeating itself. She saw the league once again allowing stars to play with reckless abandon while role players like Lexie absorbed the punishment. And this time, she decided enough was enough. Now Sophie Cunningham has a reputation, and not by accident. She's earned the label of a firebrand. In Phoenix, earlier in her career, she built her identity on being scrappy, physical, and always ready to stir up a reaction. She was never the type to hide in the shadows. Some opponents hated it, some fans loved it, but everyone respected that she was unapologetically herself. That same fire followed her to Indiana, and it's part of why she's become such a fan favorite. But here's the difference. This wasn't Sophie jawing to get in someone's head. This wasn't theatrics. This was raw anger, born from seeing her teammate risk her health for the team and then be punished for it. The cameras didn't miss it either. Clips of Sophie barking at officials, pointing toward Lexie sprawled on the floor, and shaking her head in disbelief spread quickly online. Fans flooded social media with praise. Finally, someone said it. That's leadership. Sophie is all of us right now. Those were the comments echoing across timelines. In a league where players often bite their tongues to avoid fines, Sophie Cunningham became the one who put it all on the line. And what about Lexie Hull? Her story only makes Sophie's rage more understandable. Here's a player who wasn't even supposed to be on the floor in Game 2. Back spasms, soreness, a questionable tag on the injury report, all the signs pointed toward resting. But Lexie strapped up anyway, determined not to leave her team undermanned. Every step she took looked painful, but every shot she launched was fearless. Those 5 three-pointers weren't just buckets, they were acts of defiance. A statement that no matter how battered she wasn't going to fold. Sophie saw that sacrifice firsthand, and in her mind, watching Lexie punished for it was the ultimate insult. Now let's be clear, Aja Wilson is an incredible player. Nobody is denying her talent, her accolades, or her impact on the league. But this isn't about skill, it's about conduct. And in this series, conduct became the story. When the MVP repeatedly collides with players in ways that leave them limping, bruised, or worse, and yet still walks away celebrated, it sends a message. It tells younger players like Lexie that toughness will be ignored, and it tells veterans like Sophie that accountability is optional for the league's brightest stars. That's what Sophie couldn't stomach. Her explosion also shines a light on something bigger: the credibility of WNBA officiating. 41 fouls in a single game? 16 in just one quarter? That's not control, that's chaos. And it left both teams frustrated, but particularly the Fever, who saw every spark of momentum chopped down by a whistle. Kelsey Mitchell, who dropped 34 in Game 1, was smothered into just 13 points in Game 2. Not because she forgot how to score, but because every screen she tried to use turned into a collision, every cut into a wrestling match. And yet when Indiana players begged for calls, silence. Sophie knew this wasn't basketball anymore. It was survival. And here's where Gainbridge Fieldhouse comes back into play. Home court isn't just about fans. It's about accountability. It's about noise, making sure officials can't pretend not to see the shove, the elbow, the bump. When Sophie leads the Fever back onto their own floor, she's not just playing basketball. She's rallying an army of 17,000 voices behind her. She knows that in Indy, every hard hit against Lexie, every shove on Boston, every hack on Mitchell will be amplified. That energy changes everything, and Sophie's explosion has already lit the match. But let's not forget the bigger stakes here. Sophie Cunningham's reaction risks consequences. The league could fine her. Critics could call her dramatic. Opponents could use it as bulletin board material. But there's another possibility, that Sophie's stand becomes the spark for change, that the WNBA realizes it can't keep ignoring the outcry, that maybe, just maybe, officials start calling games with a little more consistency, protecting players before careers are shortened by unchecked hits. And imagine what it means for the Fever's identity. This is a young team, still carving out its place in the league's hierarchy. They're not supposed to be here, pushing the defending champions to the brink. But Sophie's anger, Lexie's toughness, Boston's grit, Mitchell's scoring, all of it combines into a narrative fans can rally behind. Underdogs fighting not just against opponents, but against the very system meant to ensure fairness. That's a story people remember. For Sophie, this may well be her legacy moment. She's had big games, clutch shots, heated confrontations, but the image of her exploding in defense of Lexie Hull, standing tall against both the aces and the officiating, may end up defining her career in Indiana. It shows she's not just a fiery personality, she's a leader who will bleed with her teammates, fight for their respect, and demand the league do better. And here's the kicker. Players notice. Around the league, others see Sophie's defiance. They see a player willing to risk her reputation for the sake of fairness. That resonates, it inspires, and it plants seeds for a cultural shift where silence is no longer the safe option, where stars and role players alike feel empowered to speak up when the balance tips too far. So when Sophie Cunningham exploded after Lexie Hull's injury, it wasn't just a highlight for one night. It was a spark that could redefine the Fever's playoff run, reshape how fans see their toughness, and maybe even push the WNBA toward overdue accountability. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about basketball, it's about respect. And Sophie Cunningham made it clear she's willing to shout, fight, and bleed until her teammate gets it.